Rabbi Yisroel ben Eliezer, often called Baal Shem Tov or Besht, was a Jewish mystical rabbi. He is considered to be the founder of Hasidic Judaism. The Besht is better known to many religious Jews as a Oeth Holy Baal Shem or most commonly, the Baal Shem Tov. The title Baal Shem Tov is usually translated into English as a Oe Master of the Good Name, but at least two other translations are possible: Good Master of the Name, taking Baal Shem as a unit, meaning one who owns the holy name, therefore has the power or uses divine names to cure illnesses and perform miracles. That is, an effective Baal Shem. One who has a good reputation in the community, since in Hebrew idiom, Baal can mean one characterized by, and Shem can mean reputation, thus one characterized by a good reputation. The name Besht, the acronym from the words comprising that name, Bet and Shintet, is typically used in print rather than speech. The appellation Oe Baal Shem was not unique to Rabbi Yisroel ben Eliezer. However, it is Rabbi Yisroel ben Eliezer who is most closely identified as the Baal Shem Tov, as he was the founder of the spiritual movement of Hasidic Judaism. The little biographical information that is known about Besht is so interwoven with legends of miracles that in many cases it is hard to arrive at the historical facts. The attitude of the Hasidim themselves towards these legends is an unusual blend of suspicion on one hand, and belief on the other. The Reb Shlomo of Rodomsk pithily declared, "Whoever believes all the miracle stories about the Baal Shem Tov and Shival ha-Baal Shem Tov is a fool, but whoever denies that he could have done them is an Epikuros, a heretic." Similarly, the Reb Mordecai of Neshkiz explains, even if a story about him never actually occurred, and there was no such miracle, it was in the power of the Baal Shem Tov, may his memory be a blessing for the life of the world to come, to perform everything. Nevertheless, from the numerous legends connected with his birth it appears that his parents were poor, upright, and pious. When he was orphaned, his community cared for him. At school, he distinguished himself only by his frequent disappearances, being always found in the lonely woods surrounding the place, rapturously enjoying the beauties of nature. Many of his disciples believed that he came from the Davidic line, tracing its lineage to the royal house of King David, and by extension with the institution of the Jewish Messiah. Early life and marriage: Yisroel was born to poor and not very young parents Eliezer and Sarah in a settlement near Okopi Shwia and registered trademark Tezhtra Cube JCY, a newly built fortress close to Kamenik in the West Ukraine, where Zbauch connects with Dniester. The fortress was built as the new border post between the crown of the Kingdom of Poland and the Ottoman Empire. Located in a historic land of Podolia, most of the territory at that time was part of the Ottoman Empire for a short period. Today, Okopi is a village located in the Besht rayon of the Ternopil Oblast. He died in Medzhybizh, which was part of Poland and today is situated in the Khmelnytsky Oblast. At the age of 3, the Besht's father gave his son his last words before passing on. They were fear absolutely no one or nothing but God, and love every single Jew no matter who he/she is and no matter what he/she is doing. In 1703, Israel became an orphan, and the Jewish community of Tlust adopted him, providing him with his basic needs. Often, after the conclusion of his studies at the local cheder, he would wander into the fields and forests that surrounded the village to meditate and recognize the wonders of God's creation. In 1710, he finished cheder and became an assistant to a Malamed. According to Hasidic legend, on his 16th birthday, Elijah the prophet appeared to him and described to him the great effects the prayers of simple folk had in heaven. Sometime in 1712 Israel became a shamash of the local synagogue. He was periodically hired as a teacher's assistant in the cheders of the small villages through which they passed. He would later relate that he took great pleasure in accompanying the children to and from school, using this opportunity to recite prayers with them and tell them Torah stories. The children's innocence and the purity with which they prayed, the Baal Shem Tov explained, caused the Almighty great satisfaction. The Mezritcher Maggid, the Baal Shem Tov's successor, would later say, "If only we kissed a Torah scroll with the same love that my master, the Baal Shem Tov, kissed the children when he took them to cheder as a teacher's assistant." According to Hasidic legend, the Baal Shem Tov would have visions in which the prophet Hashilani would appear to him. In 1716 the Baal Shem Tov married, but soon his wife died and he went on traveling throughout the eastern Galicia. After serving for a long time as helper in various small communities of the West Ukraine, he settled as a Malayim at last. The Besht was introduced to the secrets of Kabbalah by Rabbi Adam Baal Shem of Rukzis, who was a disciple of Rabbi Yisroel Baal Shem of Zamor, the successor of Rabbi Eliyahu Baal Shem of Worms. The Besht became the leader of this movement at the age of 18. Caring for the Jewish poor, the group of Tzaddikim encouraged Jews to move to agrarian lifestyles as alternatives to the chronic poverty which was the lot of city Jews. In continuation of this policy, they decided that they needed to look after the educational needs of the children living in small farm communities. If a suitable teacher could not be sourced, they themselves would do so until an alternative arrangement emerged. As such and in keeping with Jewish doctrine, the letter bearer should fulfill its contents. The Baal Shem Tov became a teacher, unregistered trademark as assistant and with unconditional love he tried to instill in these children honor for their parents and a love of God and fellow beings. He later commented, "The most joyous time in my life was teaching the small children how to say Modeh Einai, Shema Yisrael and Kamitz Alf. Due to his recognized honesty and his knowledge of human nature, he was chosen to act as arbitrator and mediator for people conducting suits against each other. And his services were brought into frequent requisition because the Jews had their own civil courts in Poland. In this avocation he succeeded in making so deep an impression upon the rich and learned Ephraim of Brody that the latter promised the Besht his daughter Chana in marriage. The man died, however, without telling his daughter of her betrothal. But when she heard of her father's wishes, she did not hesitate to comply with them. The courtship was characteristic. In the shabby clothes of a peasant he presented himself at Brody before Avraham Gershon of Kitov, brother of the girl, head of a rabbinical court in Brody, and a recognized authority in the Kabbalah and the Talmud. Avraham Gershon was about to give him alms, when the Besht produced a letter from his pocket, showing that he was the designated bridegroom. Avraham Gershon tried in vain to dissuade his sister Chana from shaming their family by marrying him, but she regarded her father's will alone as authoritative. After his marriage, Israel ben Eliezer did not remain long with his brother-in-law, who was ashamed of him. And he went to a village in the Carpathians between Brody and Kassowa. His earthly possessions consisted of a horse given him by his brother-in-law. Israel ben Eliezer worked as a laborer, digging clay and lime, which his wife delivered every week by the wagon load to the surrounding villages, and from this they derived their entire support. The magnificent scenery in this, the finest region of the Carpathians, and the possibility of enjoying it without the interruptions of city life, compensated him for his great privations. Israel ben Eliezer and Chana had 2 children, Udal and Zvi Hirsch. Development as leader and challenges. The Besht bettered his condition when he took a position as a ritual butcher in Kshilois, near Islois. He soon gave up this position in order to conduct a village tavern that his brother-in-law bought for him. During the many years that he lived in the woods and came into contact with the peasants, Israel ben Eliezer had learned how to use plants for healing purposes and to effect wonderful cures. In fact, his first appearance in public was that of an ordinary Baal Shem. He wrote amulets and prescribed cures. After many trips in Podolia and Volhynia as a Baal Shem, Besht, considering his following large enough and his authority established, decided to expound his teachings in the shtel of Medzhibais, and people, mostly from the spiritual elite, came to listen to him. Medzhibais became the seat of the movement and of the Medzhibais Hasidic dynasty. His following gradually increased, and with it the dislike, not to say hostility, of the Talmudists. Nevertheless, Besht was supported at the beginning of his career by 2 prominent Talmudists, the brothers Meir and Isaac Dov Margalios. Later he won over great and universally recognized rabbinic authorities who became his disciples and attested to both his scholarship and saintliness. These include Rabbi Mu Margolius, chief rabbi of Lemberg and later Ostroa, and author of Mu Nitivim and other works. Rabbi Yaakov Yosef HaKohen, Rabbi of Poloi. Rabbi David Halperin, Rabbi of Ostroa. Rabbi Yisroel of Satinov, author of Tiferet Yisrael. Rabbi Yosef Yilprin of Slozowitz. And Rabbi Dov Ber of Mezrich, to whose great authority as a Talmudist it was chiefly due that Besht unregistered trademark S doctrines were introduced into learned circles. Noteworthy is that the renowned Sephardic Rabbi Chaim David Azulai cites the Baal Shem Tov in his works in great laudatory terms. Some direct historical evidence remains of the Besht during the days he lived in Medzhibais. Rosman discovered numerous legal documents that shed light on this period from the Polish Czartoryski noble family archives. The Besht unregistered trademark S house is mentioned on several tax registers and his house is given tax-free status, thus indicating that he was well known to the Polish magnate as an important town resource. Several of the Besht unregistered trademark S colleagues in his stories from Shival HaBesht also appear in Polish court records, notably, Zev Wolf Kitzes and David Perks. Rosman contends that the Polish documents show the Besht and his followers were not outcasts or pariahs, but rather a respected part of the mainstream Jewish communal life. Medzhibais at the time was not some backwater village, but a thriving, prosperous, and important community in the Czartoryski estate. Other direct evidence includes the Besht's daily prayer book with his handwritten personal notes in the margins. His grave can be seen today in the Old Jewish Cemetery in Medzhibais. Over the past few years, the Aguda Zohar Tzaddikim organization has restored many graves of Tzaddikim in Ukraine, including Baal Shem Tov's. A new guest house and synagogue has been built next to the Ohel of Baal Shem Tov, and the Baal Shem Tov's synagogue in the village proper has been painstakingly restored. Both synagogues are used by the many visitors from all over the world who come to pray near the Baal Shem Tov's grave. Disputes with the Frankists and death. While the Besht lived, very little antagonism occurred between different styles of Judaism. In fact, the Besht considered himself and his disciples as mainstream. The Besht took sides with the Talmudists in their disputes against the Frankists after the mass conversion of the Frankists. The Baal Shem Tov allegedly said, "As long as a diseased limb is connected with the body, there is hope that it may be saved. But, once amputated, it is gone, and there is no hope." The upheaval caused by the threats of the Frankist movement to destroy mainstream Judaism seemed to undermine the Baal Shem Tov's health, however, and he died shortly after the conversion of many Frankists to Christianity. His legacy: Israel ben Eliezer left no books. For the Kabbalistic commentary on PSCVII, ascribed to him, Sefer Mi Rabbi Yisroel Baal Shem Tov, may not be genuine. In order to get at his teachings, it is therefore necessary to turn to his utterances as given in the works of his disciples Hasidim. Most are found in the works of Rabbi Jacob Joseph of Poloi. But since Hasidism, immediately after the death of his founder, was divided into various parties, each claiming for itself the authority of Besht, the utmost of caution is necessary in judging as to the authenticity of utterances ascribed to Besht. Chapin and Weinstock contend that the Besht was essentially the right person, in the right place, at the right time. 18th-century Podolia was an ideal place to foster a sea change in Jewish thinking. It had been depopulated one generation earlier due to the Khmelnytsky massacres. A Turkish occupation of Podolia occurred within the Besht unregistered trademark S lifetime, and along with it the influence within this frontier territory of Sabbatai Zevi and his latter-day spiritual descendants such as Malch and Jacob Frank. Once the Polish magnates regained control from the Turks, Podolia essentially went through an economic boom. The magnates were benevolent to the economic benefits the Jews provided and encouraged Jewish resettlement to help protect the frontier from future invasions. Thus, the Jewish community itself was essentially starting over. Within this context, the Jews of Podolia were opening to new ideas. The Besht unregistered trademark S refreshing new approaches to Judaism were welcome, expanding with little resistance in a community hungry for change. Elements of Besht unregistered trademark S doctrines. The foundation stone of Hasidism as laid by Besht is a strongly marked panentheistic conception of God. He declared the whole universe, mind and matter, to be a manifestation of the divine being. That this manifestation is not an emanation from God, as is the conception of the Kabbalah by Mishnagdim, for nothing can be separated from God, all things are rather forms in which God reveals himself. When man speaks, said Besht, he should remember that his speech is an element of life, and that life itself is a manifestation of God. Even evil exists in God. This seeming contradiction is explained on the ground that evil is not bad in itself, but only in its relation to man. It is wrong to look with desire upon a woman. But it is divine to admire her beauty. It is wrong only in so far as man does not regard beauty as a manifestation of God, but misconceives it, and thinks of it in reference to himself. Nevertheless, sin is nothing positive, but is identical with the imperfections of human deeds and thought. Whoever does not believe that God resides in all things, but separates God and them in his thoughts, has not the right conception of God. It is equally fallacious to think of a creation in time, creation, that is, God a unregistered trademark S activity, has no end. God is ever active in the changes of nature. In fact, it is in these changes that God a unregistered trademark S continuous creativeness consists. This panentheism would have been ignored, had Besht not been a man of the people. He gave his metaphysical conception of God an eminently practical significance. The first result of his principles was a remarkable optimism. Since God is immanent in all things must possess something good in which God manifests himself as the source of good. For this reason, the Besht taught, every man must be considered good, and his sins must be explained, not condemned. One of his favorite sayings was that no man has sunk too low to be able to raise himself to God. Naturally, then, it was his chief endeavor to convince sinners that God stood as near to them as to the righteous, and that their misdeeds were chiefly the consequences of their folly. Another important result of his doctrines, which was of great practical importance, was his denial that asceticism is pleasing to God. Whoever maintains that this life is worthless is in error, it is worth a great deal. Only one must know how to use it properly. From the very beginning Besht fought against that contempt for the world which, through the influence of Isaac Luria unregistered trademark S. Kabbalah, had almost become a dogma among the Jews. He considered care of the body as necessary as care of the soul. Since matter is also a manifestation of God, and must not be considered as hostile or opposed to him. As Besht fought ascetics, so he fought the rigidity and sanctimony that had accreted to strict Talmudic viewpoints while not abrogating a single religious ceremony or observance. His target was the great importance which the Talmudic view attaches to the fulfillment of a law, while almost entirely disregarding sentiment or the growth of Mani unregistered trademark S inner life. While the rabbis of his day considered the study of the Talmud as the most important religious activity, Besht laid all the stress on prayer. All that I have achieved, he once remarked, I have achieved not through study, but through prayer. Prayer, however, is not merely petitioning God to grant a request, nor even necessarily speaking to God, but rather the glorious feeling of unregistered trademark oneness with God Almighty. Unregistered trademark, the state of the soul wherein a man or woman gives up their consciousness of separate existence, and join their own selves to the eternal being of God Supreme. Such a state produces indescribable bliss, which is the foremost fruit of the true worship of God. Influence on Hasidism. The later developments of Hasidism are unintelligible without consideration of Besht unregistered trademark S opinion concerning Mani unregistered trademark S proper relation with the universe. True worship of God, as above explained, consists in the cleaving to, and the unification with, God. To use his own words, where the ideal of man is to be a revelation himself, clearly to recognize himself as a manifestation of God. Mysticism, he said, is not the Kabbalah, which everyone may learn. But that sense of true oneness, which is usually as strange, unintelligible, and incomprehensible to mankind as dancing as to a dove. However, the man who is capable of this feeling is endowed with a genuine intuition, and it is the perception of such a man which is called prophecy, according to the degree of his insight. From this it results, in the first place, that the ideal man may lay claim to authority equal, in a certain sense, to the authority of the prophets. This focus on oneness and personal revelation helps earn his mystical interpretation of Judaism the title of panentheism. A second and more important result of the doctrine is that through his oneness with God, man forms a connecting link between the Creator and creation. Thus, slightly modifying the Bible verse, Happy 4, Besht said, only the righteous can vivify by his faith. Besht unregistered trademark S followers enlarged upon this idea and consistently deduced from it the source of divine mercy, of blessings, of life. And that therefore, if one love him, one may partake of God unregistered trademark S mercy. On the opposite side of the coin, the Baal Shem Tov warned the Hasidim, a Melch is still alive today. Every time you experience a worry or doubt about how God is running the world unregistered trademark S a Melch launching an attack against your soul. We must wipe a Melch out of our hearts in Euro, and here Euro he attacks so that we can serve God with complete joy. Though Besht may not be held responsible for the later conceptions, there is no doubt that his self-reliance was an important factor in winning adherents. It may be said of Hasidism that there is no other Jewish sect in which the founder is as important as his doctrines. Besht himself is still the real center for the Hasidim. His teachings have almost sunk into oblivion. As Skijter finally observes, only to the Hasidim, Baal Shem, Besht was the incarnation of a theory, and his whole life the revelation of a system. Characteristics: Besht did not combat the practice of rabbinical Judaism. It was the spirit of the practice which he opposed. His teachings being the result not of speculation, but of a deep, religious temperament, he laid stress upon a religious spirit, and not upon the forms of religion. Though he considered the law to be holy and inviolable, and emphasized the importance of Torah study, he held that only unregistered trademark S entire life should be a service of God, and that this would constitute true worship of him. Since every act in life is a manifestation of God, and must perforce be divine, it is man unregistered trademark S duty so to live that the things called may also become noble and pure, that is, divine. Besht tried to realize his ideal in his own career. His life provided the best example for his disciples. And his relationships with the innkeepers furnished a silent but effective protest against the practice of the rabbis, who, in their inexorable sense of strict righteousness, would have no dealings with people fallen morally. The Hasidim tell of a woman whom her relatives sought to kill on account of her shameful life, but who was saved in body and soul by Besht. The story may be a myth, but it is characteristic of Besht unregistered trademark S activity in healing those in greatest need of relief. More important to him than prayer was a friendly relationship with sinners, though the former constituted an essential factor in the religious life. The story of Besht unregistered trademark S career affords many examples of unselfishness and high-minded benevolence. And while these qualities equally characterize a number of the rabbis of his day, his distinguishing traits were a merciful judgment of others, fearlessness combined with dislike of strife, and a boundless joy in life. Moreover, Besht unregistered trademark S methods of teaching differed essentially from those of his opponents and contributed not a little to his success. He directed many satirical remarks at his opponents, an especially characteristic one being his designation of the typical Talmudist of his day as a man who through sheer study of the law has no time to think about God. Besht illustrated his views of asceticism by the following parable: a thief once tried to break into a house, the owner of which, crying out, frightened the thief away. The same thief soon afterward broke into the house of a very strong man, who, on seeing him enter, kept quite still. When the thief had come near enough, the man caught him and put him in prison, thus depriving him of all opportunity to do further harm. Not by fleeing from earthly enjoyments through fear is the Saul unregistered trademark S power assured, but by holding the passions under control. Much of Besht unregistered trademark S success was also due to his firm conviction that God had entrusted him with a special mission to spread his doctrines. In his enthusiasm and ecstasy he believed that he often had heavenly visions revealing his mission to him. For him every intuition was a divine revelation. and divine messages were daily occurrences. An example of the power of his spiritual vision is found in the beginning of his grandson's work, Daigle, where he writes that his grandfather wrote to Gershon Kitover, who lived in Israel, asking him why he was not in Israel that particular Shabbos. In legend, in Hasidic tradition, theory a unregistered trademark essay saying, a someone who believes in all the stories of the Baal Shem Tov and the other mystics and holy men is a fool. Someone who looks at any single story and says that one could not be true is a heretic. About his parentage, legend tells that his father, Eliezer, whose wife was still living, was seized during an attack, carried from his home in Wallachia, and sold as a slave to a prince. On account of his wisdom, he found favor with the prince, who gave him to the king to be his minister. During an expedition undertaken by the king, when other counsel failed, and all were disheartened, Eliezer unregistered trademark's advice was accepted. And the result was a successful battle of decisive importance. Eliezer was made a general and afterward prime minister, and the king gave him the daughter of the viceroy in marriage. But, being mindful of his duty as a Jew and as the husband of a Jewess of the then Wallachia, he married the princess only in name. After being questioned for a long time as to his strange conduct, he confessed to the princess that he was a Jew, who loaded him with costly presents and aided him to escape to his own country. On the way, the prophet Elijah appeared to Eliezer and said, on account of thy piety and steadfastness, thou wilt have a son who will lighten the eyes of all Israel. And Israel shall be his name, because in him shall be fulfilled the verse, unregistered trademark thou art my servant, O Israel, in whom I will be glorified. Unregistered trademark Eliezer and his wife Sarah, however, reached old age childless and had given up all hope of ever having a child. But when they were nearly 100 years old, the promised son was born. Besht unregistered trademark's parents died soon after his birth, bequeathing to him only the deathbed exhortation of Eliezer, we always believe that God is with you, and fear nothing. Besht ever remained true to this injunction. Thus, on one occasion, when he was escorting schoolchildren to synagogue, a wolf was seen, to the terror of old and young, so that the children were kept at home. But Besht, faithful to the bequest of his father, knew no fear. And, on the second appearance of the wolf, he assailed it so vigorously as to cause it to turn and flee. Now, says the legend, this wolf was Satan. Satan had been very much perturbed when he saw that the prayers of the children reached God, who took more delight in the childish songs from their pure hearts than in the hymns of the Levites in the temple in Jerusalem. And it was for this reason that Satan tried to put a stop to Besht unregistered trademark's training the children in prayers and taking them to synagogue. From this time on, successful struggles with Satan, demons, and all manner of evil spirits were daily occurrences with Besht. The true meaning of the story is that even the wolf/Satan had a spark of the divine that was in a shell. Scholarly biography, founder of Hasidism, A Quest for the Historical Baal Shem Tov by Moshe Rosman. Reprint with new introduction. London, Littman Library of Jewish Civilization, 2013. ISBN 978-1-906764-44-9. The Baal Shem Tov is an elusive subject for historians because documentary evidence about his life is scanty and equivocal. Until now, much of what was known about him was based on stories compiled more than a generation after his death, many of which served more to mythologize him than to describe him. The portrait provided in this book is drawn from life instead of from myth. Based on innovative critical analysis of familiar and previously unexplored archival sources, and concentrating on accounts that can be attributed to the Besht or to contemporary eyewitnesses, the book goes further than any previous work in uncovering the historical Baal Shem Tov. Additionally, documents in Polish and Hebrew discovered during research for the book give the first detailed description of the cultural, social, economic, and political context of the Besht's life. Founder of Hasidism supplies the history behind the legend. It presents the best, most convincing description that can be drawn from the existing documentary evidence, changing our understanding of the Besht and, with it, the master narrative of Hasidism. A substantial new introduction considers what has changed in the study of Hasidism since the influential first edition was published, these changes being in part due to the influence of the book. There are new approaches, new sources, and new interpretations, and these are reviewed and critically assessed. Criticisms of the original edition are answered and key issues are reconsidered, including the authenticity of the various versions of the Holy Epistle, the ways in which Jacob Joseph's books can be utilized as historical sources, and the relationship between the Maggid of Mezharij and Jacob Joseph of Polonoi. The first edition, a founder of Hasidism, won the 1996 National Jewish Book Award for Jewish History and the 2000 Zalman Shazar Prize for Outstanding Achievement in Jewish Historical Research. Legacy: the Baal Shem Tov directly imparted his teachings to his students, some of whom founded their own respective Hasidic dynasties. These students include Rabbi Yaakov Yosef of Polonoi, Rabbi Zev Wolf Kitzes of Hasidism, Rabbi Yechiel Mishal of Slotchev, Rabbi Dov Ber of Mezerich, traced to King David by way of Rabbi Yohanan, the sandal maker and master in the Talmud, Rabbi Pinchas of Koretz, Rabbi Nachum Twerski of Chernobyl, founder of the Chernobyl Hasidic dynasty, Rabbi Leib of Shpola, Rabbi Avraham Gershon of Kitov, brother-in-law of the Baal Shem Tov. Descendant of Shabbatai HaKohen, Rabbi Mu Margolius of Ostrower, Rabbi Moshe Chaim Ephraim of Zudilkov, Rabbi Baruch of Medzheba is his grandson, Rabbi Mu Hagadol of Premishlan, Rabbi Nachman of Horodenka. See also: Baal Shem Tov family tree, Hasidic Judaism, History of the Jews in Brody, List of Hasidic dynasties, Medzhebais, Reb, Hasidim and Mishnagdim, Zavaat HaRavash. Notes. References. This article incorporates text from a publication now in the public domain, Jewish Encyclopedia 1901-1906. The chief source for the Besht unregistered trademark S biography is Ber Ben Shmuel unregistered trademark S Chivchu Ha Besht, Koplis, 1814, and frequently republished, and traditions recorded in the works of various Hasidic dynasties especially by the leaders of the Chabad movement. For the Besht unregistered trademark S teachings, the following works are especially valuable: Jacob Joseph HaKohen, Toldot Yaakov Yosef, Likitim Yekarim a collection of Hasidic doctrines, the works of Rabbi Dov Ber of Mezerich, Zava unregistered trademark at HaRavash, Guidelines, Doctrines and Instructions for Religio-Ethical Conduct, Kit Shem Tov, an anthology of his teachings, compiled mainly from the works of Jacob Joseph of Polon and Likitim Yekarim. Sefer Baal Shem Tov, a 2-volume anthology of his teachings compiled from over 200 Hasidic texts, and constituting the most comprehensive collection. Zava unregistered trademark at HaRavash and Kit Shem Tov are the most popular anthologies and have been reprinted numerous times. All editions until recently, however, are corrupt, with numerous omissions, printing errors and confused citations. Both texts have now appeared in critical annotated editions with extensive corrections of the texts. These new authoritative editions were edited by Rabbi Jacob Emanuel Scotcher, who also added analytical introductions, copious notes of sources and cross-references, commentaries, numerous supplements and detailed indices, and were published by the Chabad Publishing House Kehot in Brooklyn, NY. Further reading: Buxbaum, Yitzhak, Light and Fire of the Baal Shem Tov, ISBN 978-0826417725, Bloomsbury Academic, New York, 2005. Etks, Emmanuel, The Besht, Magician, Mystic, and Leader hardcover December 21, 2004, Dubno, Yevriskaya Historia, E. 426 €431, Idam, in Voskhod, Nose 5 €10, Heinrich Graf Currency TZ, Jish. Der Juden, 2d ed., Xi. 94 €98, 546 €554, Jost, Jish. Des Judenthums und seiner Sekten, E. 185 A Sek. A Kahana, Rabbi Yisroel Baal Shem, Jitamir, 1900, D. Cohen, in Hush. R. B. 500 euro 504, 553 euro 554, Rudkinson, Dali. Baal Shem Tov. Ob. Car paragraph Nixberg, 1876, Skitchter, Studies in Judaism, 1896, pages 1 euro 45, Zifl, Shalom euro unregistered trademark Rabbi Yisroel, IA Euroi. Zederbaum, Kitakihuna, pages 80 euro 103, Frumkin, a euro unregistered trademark Adat. Hasidim, Lemberg, 1860, 1865, Israel Zangwill, Dreamers of the Ghetto, pages 221 euro 288. Shapin, David A. and Weinstock, Ben, The Road from Letikov, The History and Culture of a Forgotten Jewish Community in Eastern Europe, Volume 1. ISBN 0-595-00666-3 iUniverse, Lincoln, Nebraska, 2000. Rabinowitz, TZVIM. The Encyclopedia of Hasidism, ISBN 1-56821-123-6 Jason Aronson, Incorporated, 1996. Rosman, Moshe, founder of Hasidism, ISBN 0-520-20191-4 University of Caliph. Press, 1996. Rosman, Moshe, a Oemenid Zybos and Rabbi Yisroel Baal Shem Tov Euro, Zion, Volume 52, No. 2, 1987, pages 177-89. Reprinted within Essential Papers on Hasidism ed. G.D. Hundert ISBN 0-8147-3470-7, New York, 1991. Scotche, Jacob Emanuel, Rabbi Yisroel Baal Shem Tov, Lieberman, Toronto 1961, Scotche, Jacob Emanuel, Zava Euro unregistered trademark at Harivash Euro The Testament of Rabbi Yisroel Baal Shem Tov, Quixote, Brooklyn, New York, 1998. Full text provided online, Scotche, Jacob Emanuel, The Mystical Dimension, 3 volumes, Quixote, Brooklyn, New York, 1990, Sears, David, The Path of the Baal Shem Tov, Early Hasidic Teachings and Customs Jason Aronson, Queens, New York, 1997 ISBN 1-56821-972-5, Singer, Isaac Bashevis, Reaches of Heaven, A Story of the Baal Shem Tov, Faber, 1982. External links, The Baal Shem Tov Foundation, Brief Biography, Zava Euro unregistered trademark at Harivash Euro The Testament of Rabbi Yisroel Baal Shem Tov translated to English, Baal Shem Tov mini-site on Shabbat.org, map of the Baal Shem Tov and his disciple Euro unregistered trademark S travels from Routledge Publishing, 36 Aphorisms of the Baal Shem Tov, Jewish Encyclopedia article, video lecture on the Baal Shem Tov on YouTube by Dr. Henry Abramson History of Jewish Community in Mitzvahs. Baal Shem Tov Stories Chasyet Stories Archive, Baal Shem Tov Foundation Story Room, Hasidic Stories Besht, Baal Shem Tov Foundation Library.